How's it going, everybody? Jackson Fuller here, and you are listening to the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. It is Tuesday, September 7th, and a few days have passed since a very unconvincing Arkansas football victory over UAB. We will bring Hutch in momentarily to discuss that, and of course, look forward to the SEC. 3 weeks have gone by. We've been able to make some judgments and conclusions about Arkansas, but really the nitty gritty of the schedule has arrived, and really the fate of Sam Pittman is probably going to be determined over the next 4 or 5 weeks or so before even the end of the season arrives. It's a critical stretch for not only the program, but for himself. So let's go ahead. Let's get started. We'll play that rock music, bring Hutch in, and get the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic started. Hello, Hutch. How nice was it to cover an Arkansas football game in Fayetteville this weekend? It only took 3 weeks, but we finally got to be in the comfy press box of Reynolds Razorback Stadium and watch a home game that we won't get to watch for another 2 weeks. But did you enjoy the day one Fayetteville experience for the season opener?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure just like the players, it's nice to sleep in your own bed, before and after the game, and get to be familiar with the drive and all that kind of stuff. Not having to be in a new area, so I enjoyed it. It was a pretty good crowd for a home opener, especially given the heartbreaking way they lost the week before at Oklahoma State. So got to give the fans credit for showing up, and you just kind of wish there was maybe a better product on the field for the game that they could have seen and that we could have seen.
For sure. I will say I was impressed with there were a few empty seats at the beginning. Definitely some more empty seats at the end of the game, but I thought the environment was great. The fans that were there in attendance were plenty loud to start. Everyone was fired up. So kudos to the Arkansas fans. I know there's a lot of apathy right now with the football program in some circles, but I think they showed up, and I hope by the time Arkansas returns home in October, there's more reason to show up, but we'll get to that later on. 37-27, Arkansas over UAB. They were down 17-3 early in the second quarter, rallied to eventually tie the score at halftime at 20-20, and then, they looked pretty comfortable in the second half. UAB got it to within 3 in the fourth quarter, but I still don't think I ever felt like Arkansas was actually going to lose that game. Let's start here, Hutch. On a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you with the Arkansas football program, based off UAB and really the past 3 weeks as a whole?
It's hard to say. I would say moderately concerned, so maybe like a 5 or a 6. UAB is definitely concerning, but you could also write it off as, maybe they kind of let their foot off the gas. They did have an emotional loss the week before. They put so much into that Oklahoma State game. I mean, Sam Pittman told us, I guess they spent like 6 practices during fall camp on Oklahoma State. That should tell you everything you need to know about UAPB right there. Then throw on the fact that UAPB game was on a Thursday, so you had an extra couple of days. So you had probably the equivalent of 2 weeks worth of preparation for Oklahoma State. And to have it seemingly in the bag and then blow it the way they did, I think it's only natural to have a letdown, especially when you throw in the fact that, we can talk about excuses all day long, but, Sam Pittman did say they weren't as physical as they probably needed to be because of injuries and guys in green jerseys. I'm willing to accept that as an excuse as long as the same stuff doesn't happen this week against Auburn. This is a very winnable game. I think that's going to tell us a whole lot about this team. More so than Oklahoma State, more so than UAB. That's why I'm kind of reserving judgment. I'm not hitting the panic button, as much as easy as it was to do whenever they were down 17-3. I think given a few days to really sit back and think about it, I'm more of still in kind of a wait and see, moderate concern kind of mode.
I agree. I would say I'm a 5, but I was probably a 5 entering the season, where it was just like, if you disappoint, I'm gonna get ratcheted up to a 9, and if you exceed expectations or live up to maybe expectations, I'm gonna lower that to a 2. I just think it's hard to take too much away from this game for a variety of reasons. I think Sam even acknowledged it too, and he didn't come out and say this bluntly, but I do think Arkansas was looking in the past as well as looking ahead. I think, he said bluntly that they expected to dominate this team and they didn't. If your head coach believes that, that mindset's absolutely going to seep into the players. And I think Arkansas probably thought it would just be an easy win, and UAB, give them credit. They probably played their best game of the season, at least to date, against Arkansas. They found some holes that they wanted to attack, and they did so brilliantly. And I don't think UAB is going to be a tremendous team this year, but there's a lot of SEC teams, and even if outside the conference, just teams that have had one stinker already through 3 weeks. It happens, especially in this new era of transfer portal and roster turnover. I think the offense remains very encouraging, and whether in a had to have it drive there in the fourth quarter, Arkansas marched down the field and scored a touchdown. Even against, no matter the competition last year, that was kind of hard to find. I think Sam said it during his Monday press conference, like, if you can run the ball, that's going to help you win close games, and they clearly can run the football. Now, the two biggest concerns I have with this team are both passing for the offense and the defense. Taylen Green has looked incredible at times through the first 2 weeks. Week 3, he did not. 11 of 20. What was he? 11 of 24? 11 of 26. That's just simply not good enough. His running around and scrambling looked great. I don't think that's sustainable against the SEC. So if I am going to point to something, it's the pass offense and the pass defense, for that matter, against UAB, where clearly there is a weakness defending the middle of the field, slot receivers, tight ends. That's, Danico Slaughter at the Hog. It's also, I think, when rewatching the game, the safeties as well. I think Jaden Johnson got burned on one big play. It might have been the last touchdown of the game. It just looks, the pass defense does not look as good as it was last year. And the passing offense, I think it's going to be just inconsistent this year with Taylen at quarterback. And that's not something that's really a surprise, but maybe through the first 2 weeks, we thought it was going to be a little bit better than maybe reality.
Yeah, I think I expected the pass defense to maybe be a little bit better, in that UAB game. But at the same time, you can give them a little bit of slack. They were without Jalen Braxton, their top corner. He was held out, dealing with tendonitis. Sounds like he's going to be back against Auburn. You also can't discount the loss of Hudson Clark. I mean, I thought that was a big loss for the Oklahoma State game early on. I think we talked about that last week. I mean, he is a good player, despite kind of being a polarizing figure amongst the fan base. He is a big, good player. Now he's dealing with a back injury. Doesn't sound encouraging for this weekend. Hopefully they can get him healthy and back, because he would really help that defense, especially, right now. I mean, you don't really have anybody else to put in there at nickel where Slaughter is. I think his backup is listed as Tevis Metcalf, who I think is going to be a fine player eventually, but he's a true freshman. And I think he struggled a tad bit against UAPB. So that makes me worried for, him going up against an SEC, competition before he's ready for it. And then you've got safeties. You've got basically 3 that you've rotated. Jaden Johnson, help me out here. Larry Worth rotated in, and TJ Metcalf started as well. So, I mean, you'd like to have Hudson Clark available there to play some nickel. He played some nickel, I believe, in that UAPB game. It was a little bit of a eye-opener there. So getting him back would be huge for that defense. I think that would help. But the inconsistencies of the offense, the passing game from Taylen Green, not particularly surprising to me. Sam Pittman can say all he wants that it was the first time he's seen that kind of inaccuracy issue from Taylen, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we saw a couple of practices like that during the spring where he just was missing, and he would look good some days, but then there'd be days where he just was off. I would imagine it was the same during fall camp. We didn't get to see quite as much of practice during fall. But I think that's part of Taylen Green right now. Now he could improve and work that out maybe next year, because I think he's got another year of eligibility. But this year I feel like it's just going to be a little bit up and down with some accuracy issues every now and then.
Hutch, it was an issue week 1 against UAPB. I mean, he missed, he cleaned it up in the second quarter, but in the first quarter he missed Tyrone on the deep shot on the first play. He missed a couple receivers on easy slant routes, 2 in 1 drive. I mean, Sam's saying that to instill confidence in his guy, and you don't want to crap talk your starting quarterback. And to be fair, I don't think he should. Taylen has been tremendous, I think, in terms of what he has brought to this team as a leader and as a running quarterback. I think we cannot diminish what he allows this offense to do with his athleticism. I think it's a big part in why Jaquindon Jackson is having such a great year, because every time he goes to hand the football off, the defenses have to account for him pulling it and beating them himself. So that opens up space for Jaquindon. The defense, it's funny, it's a little sad. I think I haven't really thought about this until literally 2 minutes ago when you were kind of talking about Hudson and Danico, and it's like thinking about last year's team, and their strength was against the pass, in terms of the defense. And who was their slot cornerback? It was Snacks Johnson, who I think is a better pass defender than a run defender. But Arkansas's defense struggled against the run. Snacks leaves. So what do? They fill that spot with a Danico Slaughter, who I believe is a better run defender than a pass defender. And Arkansas just hasn't, in the past couple of years, been able to find that right mix in the middle of the secondary. I think their outside cornerbacks overall have been pretty dang good over the past 2 years, whether that's McGlothern, Braxton. I have, Singletary. Some people are not impressed with how he played against Oklahoma State. I thought that was kind of by design, letting them have the short passes. He had that terrific interception. The outside of the secondary seems good. It's just that inside, it's either been a weakness against the pass or a weakness against the run, and they haven't quite found that elite level safety, nickelback guy that can come in, defend the box, and defend the pass. And right now we're seeing it through the passing game, and it's just something to monitor, because I think Auburn, they crushed Arkansas with the run last year. I think they've got the pieces that they can crush teams also in the pass in a similar style of UAB, with the tight end, Rivaldo Fairweather, some of their slot guys, leaking. Oh my gosh, what's the Jarquez Hunter out of the backfield? That's going to also fall on maybe a slot or the linebackers. So I think, Arkansas, they've got to figure that position, that part of the defense. It's not just Slaughter; it's the entire defense that guards the pass in the middle of the field very quickly, because that's something I think Auburn and Hugh Freeze historically have been pretty good at.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, no doubt about it. I mean, Jarquez Hunter, we talk about him as in the passing game and that aspect of it, but I think he's also a really good runner as well. And not to mention the quarterback change at Auburn. You don't have Peyton Thorne throwing the ball around anymore. You got a much better passer in Hank Brown. That's going to be a challenge as well. Obviously, his only action was last week against New Mexico. Arkansas presumably is a step up from that. So I mean, yeah, it's going to be a big time challenge. And Hugh Freeze kind of has Arkansas's number right now. Last year destroyed them with a kind of mediocre Auburn team when Arkansas still had a bowl game to play for. And then the year before that, obviously bringing Liberty in here and beating Arkansas with when they had KJ Jefferson a little bit banged up, but hey, they still won. So it's gonna be a really big challenge for them.
No doubt. Before we move on to Auburn, a couple. Let's keep talking a little bit UAB. What'd you make of the pass rush? I think that's something that Sam, he asked more from his defensive line in the pass rush. He said we didn't get it. He was still disappointed with it. But then, kind of looking at some of the advanced stats, I mean, Landon Jackson had 5 quarterback hurries on his own and a hit. If Arkansas does a little bit better of grabbing the face masks and a little more careful with that, or the helmets, I guess, he probably gets his first sack. There are some more negative plays that UAB was fortunate Arkansas committed penalties on. Did you see any improvement like I did, or is this still like a glaring red concern for this team?
It was a little better, but I'm still pretty concerned about it because it is UAB. The Arkansas, the SEC offensive lines are going to face are going to be better than UAB's. So I am still concerned. You would have liked to see, I think the only sack they had was Brad Spence, made a really nice play, kind of spying the quarterback and just kind of running them down. Still waiting to see the defensive line have an impact like that. We just haven't really seen it. I think Landon Jackson did play his best game. I was impressed by how he played, even though it maybe wasn't reflected in like the traditional statistics. Like you're saying, the advanced stats really liked him. So I think that was an encouraging sign. Now it's okay, can you build on it against a better team on the road like they're going to have this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk some positives because they did win this game. The offense did, rack up 262, I think, rushing yards, something along that number. Jaquinda Jackson, man, I mean, 15 carries for 149 yards. He averaged 9.8 yards per carry. It just feels like if you give this guy the ball 2 times in a row, he's on one of those plays, he's going to get a big gain. He had a touchdown. He's now had 3 straight games with 100 yards. I was here last year and Rocket was here, but it was a down year for Rocket for a variety of reasons. The injury, seems like a foolish decision to make him put on 15 pounds that he did, and he looks much better with South Carolina this year. But 1 year prior to that, Rocket Sanders in 2022 and even, maybe 2021, from your vantage point, how does Jaquinda compare to Rocket there? Is Rocket maybe his ceiling still higher, or do you think Jaquinden's right there in terms of production and what he could be as a running back based off what you saw when Rocket was playing well for the Arkansas program?
Through 3 games, I think he's just as good as Rocket. I do have health concerns because it seems like he's kind of been banged up. I mean, he's banged up at Utah. He was banged up during, I think, spring a little bit, or definitely fall. We know he cramped up against Oklahoma State. That proved to be huge. I am worried about him holding up and being able to maintain this in the SEC. But I do think as long as he's healthy, he's going to be productive, even against SEC teams. I think he's just been really, really impressive. And it's kind of similar to Rocket, where it's like you felt like, yeah, he's going to give you 100 yards every time out. So I think he's been a gem of a find. I think he leads the SEC in rushing right now. He's averaging like 8.4 yards a pop. You'll take that all day long. And that's, including a really, really good performance against Oklahoma State. It's not like it's all inflated by UAPB or even UAB. So been really, really impressed by him. He's kind of lived up to my expectations and then some, because I was really high on Jaquinda coming into the season as well.
Agree. I think the one thing that this Arkansas offense is missing right now, and this isn't to say it's not there, but we just haven't really seen it a whole lot, and I'm trying to delay because I want to make sure I've got this right before I bring it up. But it's just like it's that big, super, super explosive play. Like Taylen's longest pass is 43 yards, which is pretty good, but like we haven't seen that he hit Isaiah Satania for a 60-yard bomb, or Armstrong or Broden. And I think part of that might be because of the weapons he's throwing to. Like they're not really these like huge explosive receivers. I mean, Armstrong's got a great yards per catch, and so do most of the receivers, but we haven't seen that. And the same with Jaquinda. I think his long run is 46 yards, which I guess he did, I think, against UAPB. He hits the hole really hard, and it seems like it's very easy for him to get that 20-yard run. But I do think this team needs, especially moving forward in the SEC, like it's just such a difference maker if you can, get the occasional, not every game, but once every other game, like a 60, 70-yard touchdown. And it's something the offense did not have at all last year. We're seeing them creep toward that way. I think it's just something I'm monitoring. Jaquinda hates being called a power back. I think he's done enough to show that he's more than just a power back. But I'm still looking for that huge, huge explosive play from this offense.
I think that's a fair point, but I do think the potential is there. Last year, after a certain point, it was like, yeah, it ain't happening unless there's some sort of just massive bust by the other team. But I feel like there are guys on this team. Isaiah Satania, we really haven't seen him explode. I think that he's fully capable of doing that. Yeah, I think that 43-yard pass you referenced, I believe that was Luke Has, the long touchdown against Oklahoma State. Even that was a long catch and run by Has. So I mean, it's there. We've seen them try it with Broden The first play of the season was a deep ball to Broden that should have been that 80-something yard play if Taylen didn't underthrow it. So Broden nearly reeled in what would have been a tough catch, but a ball he probably should have hung on to, a deep ball down the sideline against UAB. So it's right there. I feel like it's going to happen at some point. So I'm not too worried about it, but I mean, it's a fair point because, as you said, it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm just a little nervous about the receivers again. I think I've been kind of the one pessimist about these receivers, and after 2 games, I was like, okay, I was wrong. But then, you know, to see Armstrong, only 2 guys make a catch other than Armstrong against UAB. And I know a lot of that is on a quarterback, but there were drops. Broden had some opportunities. Armstrong's got, he's only played 2 games and he's already got 11 more catches than anyone else and nearly 200 more. He's got 200 more yards than everyone other than Satania. There's a clear gap there, and I think it's a good thing for a quarterback to have his preferred wide receiver, but I'd like to see that gap closed a little bit. And goodness gracious, we just need to see more from Luke Haas. For him to only have 5 catches so far this season and 88 yards, that's really disappointing. And I'm not blaming Luke. I'm not blaming, Petrino or Taylen or anybody. It's a collective fault, I think, there, and they've got to find a way to get him involved. And there's a good chance that defenses are now keying on him more. Maybe Andrew Armstrong becoming this heavy target is going to create some space for Luke. Or maybe Arkansas is just saving some Luke Haas plays for the SEC, not wanting to show too much on film. Whatever the reason is, he's got to be more of a factor, don't you think, Hutch?
Oh, 100% agree. This is a guy we thought was a Mackey contender, Mackey Award contender, because he was so good in the limited opportunities we saw him last year. But I will say this. Look back at last year. It was a few games before they actually got him going. And I think it was the LSU game, I think in week 4 or something, where he really broke out and got good. He wasn't that great in non-conference play. So
he had a big game against BYU, I think, if I remember correctly. I think that was kind of his breakout game at
Gotcha.
home, and then LSU. But the first 2 games, you're right, he did not, and then all of a sudden it was there. But still, your point's right. But yeah, I think we got to mention that the BYU game last year. I'm trying to pull up his stats.
I think you're right. I think he did have like a kind of his breakout game against BYU, and then really, I think he went over 100 yards even against LSU.
You're right. 4 catches for 78 yards against BYU. And if I remember correctly, I think a lot of that came in like the second half when Arkansas was like having to come back and show some life there. They kind of were like, okay, it's nut crunch time. We're going to our freshman tight end Luke Haas. But yeah, 6 catches, 116 yards against LSU. That was his breakout game. Maybe the same thing is going to happen this week in the SEC opener, but Arkansas fans will hope for a different result, surely. One more thing real quick on the UAB game, Hutch. I think PFF is kind of a weird website. It's a lot. We reference it so much, and with good reason. They do a terrific job. It's such a great resource, but it's hard to know just exactly how accurate it is in describing a person's performance. Taylen Green is a prime example of that. He got a fairly good passing grade and was Arkansas's highest rated player on offense last week. I don't think any of the Arkansas coaches would have said he was the best offensive player for them. But on the defensive side, one guy that I'm kind of, I'm a little worried about is Brad Spence. And I think he went off with an injury maybe, or took a little knock and didn't play. When he was out of the game and Steven Dix replaced him, Arkansas's defense, I think, was a lot better last week. And the same for Xavier Sorey. He's been a little up and down, and he looks great at times, and then he has big time penalties. Is there any concern for you with just the linebacker core in general? Because I think we've talked the other 2 levels of the defense, and that one's kind of flying under the radar because Arkansas only plays 2 linebackers typically. But I am kind of the hairs are raising a little bit. Are we starting to miss Paul, Jaheim Thomas a little bit here?
Yeah, Sam Pittman mentioned that position group by name, I think after the game, saying, that was something that UAB tried to exploit was the linebackers and, getting out into the flats and, making plays out there because that's the linebacker's supposed to get out there and cover. I think that's a totally a fair assessment that it's a little bit of an issue. I mean, I think Xavier Story's been really good. It's just you mentioned those penalties. Just man, like he suplexed the guy against Oklahoma State in just an absolutely critical spot in double overtime. It would have been 3rd and 9, gives them a first down, and you lose the next play essentially. The face mask on the really scary injury. Thank God that wide receiver for UAB is okay and healthy and everything. But the whole thing that started it was Xavier Story coming in and ripping his helmet off. Just the why? You got a face mask penalty on it, so if he can cut out the dumb penalties, I think he's a very good football player. I still feel like he's good. I was impressed with Steven Dix. It was good to see him have such a good game. I think he had like 10 tackles in the game. But yeah, I mean, if Dix is going to play like that, then it's going to be harder to keep Spence. But Spence has that pass rushing ability. We saw the sack he made against UAB. So I mean, he's going to get his opportunities, even if he's not like the starting, true designated linebacker. So maybe they just got to figure out kind of how to play to each guy's particular skill set.
We haven't seen that wrinkle a lot this season, where with Spence as kind of the fourth lineman, and they're I don't know, the odd front or whatever they called it. We just haven't seen it. Maybe that's something else that they're saving for Auburn. And let's move on to the Tigers. You talk about two teams that desperately need a win. I mean, Auburn, one of the surprise results of the season. I mean, not up there with like Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois at home, but Auburn losing to Cal in week 2 was a huge shocker. 21-14 Cal, especially given how Auburn kind of closed the year last year with some big wins. They probably should have beaten Alabama at home until Jalen Milroe broke their hearts with I guess what's it called, the prayer at Jordan Hare. Is that what the Alabama fans are calling it? So what before the season, what did you think of this game, and what do you think of this game now? Maybe if quickly, what did you think before, and kind of what are your just initial thoughts about this matchup going into the week?
I thought it was a winnable type game. Definitely not a game I was picking them to win by any means. Weird stuff seems to happen in Auburn. You weren't here at the time, but you should look up the 2020 game. I'm sure you remember the Bo Nix spike / fumble. Weird stuff happens down there, though. So I would say I thought it was winnable. I was under the impression that Auburn was going to be much improved this year. I'm a big believer in Hugh Freeze. I think he's a great coach, a great offensive mind. In hindsight, maybe hitching your wagon to Peyton Thorne was not the wisest decision. Because I think he threw like 4 interceptions in that game against Cal or something like that, led to the quarterback change there. So I do think it's a more winnable game now than I thought before the season, but I still think at best it's like a toss-up type game.
I agree. I think this is going to be such the one. I mean, we've talked about it already in this podcast a lot, the Arkansas secondary, but Auburn's got 4 guys that are averaging more than 20 yards a catch. The freshman Cam Coleman is incredible. I think he missed last game and is questionable for this week, but 4 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. Hank Brown came in last week and threw for 330 yards and 6 touchdowns, or maybe not 6 touchdowns, but he threw for a lot of touchdowns. And I think this game comes down to if Arkansas's pass defense holds up against Auburn, I think they've got a great shot at winning this game, which is so funny considering last year they got ran all over in a 48-10 loss. But I've just got more faith in the run defense right now, especially up the middle. I think, despite UAB getting some, sustaining some long drives, they still averaged less than 4 yards a carry. I think Cam Ball is playing consistent up front, if, nothing elite, but I think him and Gregory are playing consistent enough up there. I think it's a question of, can Arkansas secondary hold up against Hank Brown, and if they can force this guy about to start his second game of college football into some mistakes, I think Arkansas's offense is going to score, right? Like that's, unless it's like a crazy road environment and Arkansas maybe gets a little shook. I just based off what we've seen from them all year and how they performed their first, true road game against Oklahoma State, I think Arkansas is going to score at least 28 points. So is it that simple that it comes down to the defense, or do you have some more concerns about, or some more, at least questions about the Arkansas offense going into this game?
No, I think you nailed it because as you were talking about Arkansas's defense, and being better than last year, I was thinking, man, I have full confidence that this offense is better. With Bob Vitrino calling the shots, and yes, there is concerns over Taylen Green's consistency and everything, and I do worry if his scrambling abilities will be able to hold up in SEC play. But in the first SEC game of the year, I think he should be able to do some damage with his legs. I can't speak any higher on Jaquindon Jackson. I think he's been phenomenal. So I think they're going to, and nothing about Auburn's defense has really like instilled fear in me. I think they will be able to move the ball against Auburn. Now, could be completely wrong on that. It could go completely the other direction, but I feel a lot more confident in that offense that they're going to be able to put up some points, like you said, and keep them in the game at the very least.
Yes, it's Auburn's defense has been kind of weird this year. I mean, they're giving up 340 points a game, which is, nothing at all to write home about. But even in their loss to Cal, they only gave up 21. And the offense only scored 14, which, as we learned last year, when your offense is not scoring, that gives opposing offenses extra possessions. It's crazy how that works, and gives them more chances to put up points against your defense. So I think, for Auburn to have only given up 3 touchdowns when their offense struggled so much against Cal, decent. New Mexico, they didn't look great in the first half, but they kind of righted the ship in the second half. I think you're right, though. I think it's a question mark, and we haven't really seen this Auburn defense be tested yet by a good team. So I've got the confidence in Arkansas's offense, but at the same time, this presents a test, a benchmark for them. Would you describe this game as a, I guess, game of the season? Honestly, like that seems like it might be a little hyperbolic, but after this, it's Texas A&M, it's Tennessee, it's LSU, 3 ranked teams. Is it Ole Miss after that, or Mississippi State? No, it's I can't remember, but it's definitely 3 straight ranked teams, and the road only gets more difficult from here. Like, is this a game where if Arkansas loses, it's really going to be another disappointing season, and if they win, it can be something that the fans might not have expected, or is that putting too much pressure on this one?
Before the year, I thought I even said Oklahoma State's the most important game of the year. So I feel silly saying that this now is the most important game of the year, because it's like, well, it's the next game. It's kind of stereotypical, coach speak or whatever, but it really is important. The way everything is kind of unfolded up to this point. Auburn maybe not being as good as some people thought. Arkansas looking good and showing its potential against Oklahoma State, and then taking a step back against UAB. It is a major moment of this season. If they lose this game, then you have to start worrying, like, okay, when do they let go of will they let go of the rope? I think if they lose this game, that makes Texas A&M almost a must win, because of the ranked teams they've got coming up, I think they may be one of the least scary of the ones they play. So it puts a lot more pressure on the team, because otherwise it could spiral, like we saw last year. So I do think this is a extremely important game, borderline must win. They've at least got to split these next 2 games, I think. Then you risk losing the interest of the fan base, and you don't have any kind of home field advantage for those upcoming games. I think Tennessee and maybe LSU. So it would be disastrous if they can't win one of these next 2 games, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what I was going to say. Is I don't think this is like a must-win game, but you got to go 1-1. And I think we both kind of said that before the season. Like, you have to find a way to win one of those first 3 games away from Fayetteville before Tennessee comes to town. And, because look, Tennessee looks like a juggernaut, but LSU does not. I mean, I think you could easily convince me that we get through this run of 4 games, and Arkansas is 2-2, and then they're 4-3 on the year with some winnable games coming up. I mean, if you get to 4-3, bowl eligibility is not a lock, but I think it's like a 75-80% chance, especially with how we've seen Mississippi State play. You still got that home game against Louisiana Tech. So 1-1 is absolutely imperative. And I think I just give Arkansas a better shot, weirdly, in this one on the road instead of a neutral, quote marks, neutral quotations, neutral game down in Dallas against Texas A&M. You ready to give a prediction, Hutch? I won't force you to, because in my mind, it's like, based off what I've watched from these two teams, based off what I've seen from Arkansas specifically, because of course that's who I'm paying the closest attention to. I kind of want to pick Arkansas to win, but I don't think I can until I actually see it happen. Do you have a pick, or what's kind of your logic assessing this game?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is Arkansas has to prove to me that they can win these games. That's what I wrote about the Oklahoma State game in my preseason predictions. Was until Sam Pittman proves to me that he can win these tight games, then I'm not going to pick them to win them. And maybe that's a little bit harsh, but I mean, this is definitely a game I could see Arkansas winning. Don't get me wrong, but until I see it happen with my own two eyes, I'm probably going to pick them to lose. And what the heck? To put a score on it, let's say like 34-28 or something like that. Arkansas is going to have a chance late, but not going to get it done for whatever reason.
Oof. I don't know if these fans could survive another one-score loss, man. I'm just taking a look real quick. Auburn is right now. It's only Tuesday, and the spreads, as we've seen, can move when it gets closer to game time. But it opened at Auburn 3.5, and this is according to ESPN Bet, of course, who nobody uses, but that's just I'm on the ESPN page right now. It opened at Auburn -3.5. It's currently Auburn -3, and the over/under is 58.5, which is what it opened. So, I mean, Arkansas money line is only +130. I think like that rule in gambling is kind of like the home team usually gets at least 3 points. So maybe if this game was in Fayetteville, Arkansas might be the favorite, or it would be a true even odds toss up. So I don't know. I think the biggest key, we talked about the passing defense, but it's the passing defense and the passing offense. If Taylen Green plays more closely to Oklahoma State, and the defense as a whole plays more closely to Oklahoma State than it did UAB, I think Arkansas will win this game. I just also can't rule out the dumb mistakes that happened against Oklahoma State reappearing here against Auburn. Overall though, Hutch, so far, like with this team and through 3 weeks, they've still exceeded our expectations, right? For the most part.
I think so. I mean, I predicted a close loss at Oklahoma State, but I didn't predict it to be like where they completely outplayed Oklahoma State. I mean, you look at the post-game win expectancy metric, and they should have won that game like 80-something% of the time. So that, to me, exceeded my expectations. The offense being as dramatically improved as it is has exceeded my expectations. So I think they're better than I expected. Will that translate to a better win-loss, predicted win-loss record? That remains to be seen, because the schedule is still, not the easiest in the world.
For sure. All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it there. And next week's episode is it's gonna be the extremes, one way or the other, right? I mean, we're either gonna be fully on board with a bowl game and Sam Pittman's job security at an all-time high, or at least at a high point compared to where it's been the past 2 years, or it's going to be, well, when do we kind of cut the cord here on Pittman, and when does the team let go of the rope? It's truly, I know we just said the next 2 games are kind of equally important, but it's hard to ignore just how big this one is, especially given that loss on the road to Oklahoma State. So thank you all so much for listening, as always, to Hoggin the Mic. Again, please follow us outside of this podcast, Hutch at Best of Arkansas Sports, and myself at swtimes.com. And please like and subscribe this podcast wherever you're listening. We will be back next week to recap Auburn and preview the trip to Dallas to face Texas A&M. So thank you, Hutch, for joining me as always, and thank you guys again so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon.